Hi everybody, it's meteorologist Joe Cioffi here on this Wednesday. We're still fighting a cold front out to the east with some rain just offshore, and we were trying to get this drier air to come in and cause weather conditions to improve. I had some really good thunderstorms last night. When I say good, I mean they were pretty strong. A lot of lightning, and lightning displays were pretty awesome. I think those were the best thunderstorms I had all year. Better than anything that I saw in the summertime, and of course, and that was few and far between. Long Island has been kind of a thunderstorm drought for a while. Okay, so we've got a lot going on. Very dynamic weather pattern continues, and we're going to focus our attention on the weekend, as it looks like there's going to be some kind of development off the southeast coast of the United States. We have a cold front swinging in and a deep upper trough swinging out of the plains and Midwest. We also have a bit of a tropical connection with a system in the Caribbean that may try and develop, but even if it does, whether it does or it doesn't, I don't think it really matters that much in terms of the overall structure of what's going to happen along the East Coast with regards to rain and some wind. So we're going to talk about that. And we're going to really get into the upper air pattern with all of this, with the trough and how why this is going to be something for the East Coast, how it evolves, how the trough rotates around, and all the other things that are going on either side of it that will have some impact. So still not 100% sold on this, by the way. I think there's some complications in the upper atmosphere that could kind of change this a little bit, but we'll get the weather part of the video started, and then we'll come back and we'll talk some more. In the meantime, I'll be chatting with you on the chat board, so hang on one second. Well, we're looking at a very dynamic atmosphere here across the eastern part of the United States. That seems to be something we're not used to lately, certainly not for the last 5 or 6 weeks. Considering the upper ridge that has dominated the pattern. Now we have this deep trough that's in the eastern part of the United States, and of course it's taking forever to get out of the way. We have a cold front that is literally crawling off the East Coast, and you can see it right there, the back edge of the cloud cover, and there's actually some rain just offshore, even touching some of the coastal areas, and getting into much of southern, southeastern, and eastern New England. In the meantime, we have this upper trough that's out to the west, and that is taking its time swinging eastward. So we really got to get this trough to swing up and out of the way, because while it's in this position and winds aloft along the East Coast are still blowing from south to north, the weather front can't really make any eastward progress. It's hitting a wall. It's being pushed. Those upper winds, instead of moving the front eastward, is actually causing that front to get hung up to some degree. But that's all going to change, and then we're going to see some improving weather conditions. And as we look out in the west today, really a beautiful day for most of the western part of the United States. You can see there's some kind of system here that's coming into the northwest and southwestern Canada. Probably a trailing front of some kind here, but it's basically dry over much of the western part of the United States, and that makes for very, very nice, calm, and quiet weather conditions all through this region. Also, it's telling us that we have a big ridge of high pressure aloft that is building here, so the jet stream is actually being pushed up northward into Canada, causing these dry, warm conditions out in the west. Now, one other thing to look at on the satellite, and we're going to go down into the southwestern Caribbean, where we have disturbed weather that actually extends from the northwest Caribbean southeastward into the southwest Caribbean, and there probably will be some kind of a low that's going to develop out of this eventually, somewhere right in here perhaps. We'll start to see some sort of low pressure, and that's going to move its way northward over the next several days. And this is going to be a player in the weather in the eastern part of the United States this weekend. Now, I'm going to start with the upper air here and show you. Here's our our deep trough that's with us now, and it's going to stretch and lift up and finally get out of the way. So once it does this, it gets kicked along and we see weather improving. But notice right up through here, I'll just back it up here for a second, right in here is another upper air disturbance, right up approaching the northern plains. That is actually kicking that first system out, and this one is going to be the next player in the east. So that first system gets kicked out. The next trough drops southeastward and strengthens as it nears the east coast on Sunday. So by Sunday morning, you have a stretched out north-south trough that runs from just north of the Great Lakes down through the eastern Gulf states, and the winds along the east coast are beginning to back to south-southwest. So this is why we're watching this low that's going to try to come out of the Caribbean, because it will eventually get caught in this flow. Now, I've been saying the last couple of days, and I want to emphasize, whether this becomes were to become a tropical depression or a tropical storm briefly, I don't think it really is that important, because it won't have time to develop into anything substantial. However, it is going to probably get involved in low pressure that's going to develop off the southeast coast of the United States. Now, this is going to happen regardless of whether there was a tropical system or not. That's in response to this deep trough that's going to be developing just to our west. This surface low, again, we're talking here in terms of a typical mid to late fall, wintertime, early springtime storm system, is going to be drawn up the east coast in some fashion. And how that happens is going to ultimately depend on the structure of this upper air, which is very, very dynamic. You can see it's almost doing the same thing as this lead system is doing, getting kicked along by yet another system that's coming down into the northern plain. So that kicks this one and lifts it northward. This is not getting ejected eastward, okay? If it were getting ejected eastward, then what would happen is any surface low that would, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Any surface low that would develop here, if this were getting kicked eastward, this would move out to the northeast and goodbye, and we wouldn't be worried about it. But because that upper trough is very sharp and lifting northeast and northward, that's going to bring the surface low up the east coast, very close to the coast, or if the European is correct, just inland of the coast, maybe a track like this or a track like that. Now, where the tropical system gets involved is that either the development of this surface low winds up absorbing that tropical moisture and enhancing the rainfall up and down the east coast, or maybe the tropical system stays as kind of a separate entity to some degree. I tend to think it'll probably get absorbed, in which case we could see enhanced rainfall amounts along the mid-Atlantic and on up through the northeast. And once that trough lifts out with that next one coming down, that's going to bring some colder air into the eastern part of the United States, although the coldest of that cold air is probably going to be west of the coastline. But it is a very dynamic pattern that we're looking at. I want to show you the European's idea, because the European is about the same as the GFS. The only difference is that it has much more. Let me back it up here. Let me just start from the beginning. So here's our first system getting kicked out. There's that next system coming into the northern plains that does the kicking. That dives in, and then it does pretty much sort of the same thing as the GFS. It's just a little bit sharper. It's actually deeper, I think, with this southern part of this trough than the GFS is by just enough that it would cause a low to develop off the southeast coast of the United States, and then probably track along or just inland of the coast as it moves into southern New England. This, by the way, I think will wind up producing, maybe in a small, narrow area, some snows in the mountains of eastern West Virginia down into western North Carolina, easternmost Tennessee on Sunday night into early Monday. So that might be a cheap thrill for those folks that live there in elevated areas. this will also be a substantial rain producer. And when we look at the GFS in terms of the rainfall amounts, I'll get tight here, and we'll look at the rain. So I'm going to look at 24-hour precip here, and this is from Sunday through Monday, and the white would be 2 inches, and the purples would be 3 inches plus, and there's a narrow band of that goes up into upstate New York. The European, by the way, on their precip profile actually has some 2 to 4 inch rains along and west of the mountains, and some 2 to 4 inch rains in southeastern New England. And for some reason, it has, a stripe of 1 to 2 inch rain along where the coastal low track is. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to be I can't rocket scientist this at this point, but suffice to say that we are going to see some development from this, and somebody's going to get some decent rainfall. The only thing I would caution is the fact that if somehow that upper air is not as deep or is a little more suppressed, that you could wind up with something less bullish. But you notice on the GFS actually even has some snow mixing in on the western edge of that in parts of Pennsylvania. But you see how the tropical system, you can sort of barely find it here. It kind of takes part of it and absorbs it and leaves part of it behind. I don't know whether that's true or not. This surface low that develops southeast of Hatteras winds up going northeast and then north, okay, up into eastern Massachusetts. The European's track is about 90 miles to the west of this, same idea, because of how it responds to the upper air system. Meanwhile, we'll widen out so we can get a look at the weather around the country. And I promise I will look at the snowfall maps. So we'll take it on its progression. There's your system coming into the plains, producing snows in parts of North Dakota, Minnesota, and on up into perhaps northwestern Wisconsin eventually. I'm not sure. Yeah, it does get it in there as that low drops into southwestern Wisconsin. The trailing cold front, and then the tropical system that comes out. By the way, the weather in the west, very calm and quiet. There's your low in the east, lifts up. And then we've got a secondary front with that second trough that's coming back behind it. This is where the cold, there's some colder air behind that. So you see some snows breaking out over parts of the Dakotas, Minnesota, on up through Wisconsin and the upper peninsula of Michigan. It's on the light side. Then in the west, of course, calm and quiet. Earlier, a few days ago, was trying to drop a system into the Rockies. That does not appear to be the case now. Instead, that low is actually going out into the northern plains, and this is for later next week and into next weekend. The overall snow picture here, in terms of what the model is generating for total snowfall, here's that first system, by the way, in the east. You can see it here. Let me just back up so you can see how it progresses from the start. So here's Sunday. That little stripe there in the mountains of West Virginia into western North Carolina. Notice the more bullish amounts are up right along the Canadian border. And then as we go through the end of the period, there's some substantial snows along and north of the Canadian border, and just kind of some of that's bleeding southward, but no big storms on the horizon from the standpoint of snow going into the first part of November. And by the way, this is a take back from yesterday, when you saw the model on the late run when we did our video, and it showed all this snow in Ohio and Kentucky and Indiana. Obviously, that is not going to be the case based on this particular model run. So we'll leave you at that. We'll come back now and do a little chatting, and I'll leave you with the satellite view of the tropical system that's in the southwestern Caribbean. So just stand by. Fallen Angel wants to know if we're going to have a white Christmas. I guess it depends. Fallen Angel, where are you anyway? Where are you located? But that goes back to my comment earlier on just hitting it, getting ahead of the curve here until when somebody asks me about a winter forecast. I'm not making one. And, I know a lot of you, I know, as a snow lover, trust me, I know. You want to know when that first snowfall date is going to be. You're very anxious for it. I get that. But there's no way I could tell you when I think it's going to be. You know, certainly not at this point. Now, I was thinking back, I remember a few years ago, the pattern evolved in a certain way toward the end of November, and I kind of thought that, you know, maybe we would get maybe a first, you know, an early snowfall out of it, which it turned out we did. But, you know, I don't know if it was blind luck or anything, or skill. I'll attribute it more, maybe a combination of both. I don't know. But there's no real way to answer that question. I mean, it'll come when it'll come. With respect to, you know, the Christmas thing, a lot depends on the December pattern, which is very volatile, and you know, the odds are always against you. If you're down near the coastal areas, the further south you are, obviously, are always against you having a white Christmas, although it is always quite nice to have one. I think Charles Dickens did a great disservice by in A Christmas Carol with the image of the white Christmas, which in England at the time was actually something that was happening on a regular basis because they were going through their mini ice age thing. But in reality, it's a very rare thing for them to see snow in Christmas. So, just Zach, living in New England, I tend to think of Noreasters as snow producers. A few years back, we did have a snowstorm around the area of Halloween. Actually, October 29th is not the nicest date because that's the anniversary of Sandy. It's also the year before that was what you're referring to. That was the big, heavy, wet snowstorm that occurred through much of southern New England with some mega amounts of wet snow that did a lot of damage and as I remember, left some areas without power for weeks. But October snows they seem to want to happen in years when we have El Niños for some reason. I have to go back and look at that. But that was 11-12 was an El Niño year. And actually, even in 15-16 with the Super El Nino in October, we actually did have snow here with a shot of cold air in October. It turned out to be the last cold shot we probably saw until after January 1st. In that cold shot, I remember seeing it was so cold aloft that even though the ground temperatures were in the mid to upper 40s, actually seeing snowflakes making it all the way to the ground. So, you know, the fact that we haven't seen anything like that is probably an indicator that the atmosphere is in a bit more of a normal state than it otherwise would be. Cynthia Winyout is a well-educated guess at this point on Central PA. More rain than anything else. I don't think wind is going to be an issue, except maybe right along the immediate coast. It may wind up being a couple of inches of rain if you know, that front is getting involved, that it swings eastward. So I'm going to have to try to figure out, you know, how much you're going to have some downpours and maybe even a thunderstorm or two with that when that front swings through with that whole upper trough. So I'm going to have to figure out how much enhancement you're going to get there in terms of convective development. But you know, the European actually painted a fairly bullish picture from the standpoint of rainfall, with some 2 to 4 inch amounts from eastern Pennsylvania westward, and then for southeastern New England eastward, and then it had a hole of 1 to 2 inches in between for coastal New Jersey, Long Island, and on northward. So it's kind of had these two areas of heavy rain on either side of the low track. But the European takes a track along or just inland of the coast, and the GFS is a little bit further offshore. The GFS's argument, by the way, would be you probably wouldn't get much more than an inch or so of rain. The further west you go into Pennsylvania, the less you would wind up getting. But we can certainly address that again tomorrow. Let's see. Seem to remember. Okay, we talked about the Halloween run. I show the GFS temps for the upper Midwest, Trish and Lou. Okay, hang on a second. Let me see if I can get this for you. Hang on. And interact. I'll get that region up for you. So let me see if this works. Oh, that's a good one. And we'll put up the Well, first, I'll show it to you in terms of the 2-meter temperature anomaly, and then we'll look at the actual temperatures. Okay, because I think that'll work. Just trying to get to the right time frame here. Hang on one second. It's kind of hard for me to see exactly with my eyes. Okay, so this is actually for tomorrow. So, okay, good. I can go from there. So, whoops. It's not letting me. Hello. Oh, maybe that's why. Okay, so we are now at, I'm just trying to figure out the time frame here. So we are now at Friday, and you can see the temperatures below normal into the first part of over the weekend and into the first part of next week. A lot of below normal temperatures up your way. So, I mean, that would certainly at least help your cause as far as getting snow into the picture is concerned. This is the last day, which is Wednesday, November 1st, I guess. This is Wednesday evening. It's hard. Yeah, I'm having a real tough time actually visualizing it. My glasses aren't that good. But certainly from the standpoint of temperatures running, you can see the scale on the side running every bit of 5 or more, or even 10 or more degrees below normal. Why don't we put the actual 2-meter temperatures on for you? And come on, behave. There we go. So I'm going to just run this for you. You can watch the time change better. You can see it better than I can. The blue areas, you notice how, you get to the nighttime lows, they drop into the 30s and even some 20s, eventually getting into the picture. There you go. So you do have some cold air. Certainly you're going to have some colder air coming down. Again, remember this time of year, it's kind of tough. We're at the end of October. It's not the beginning part of December here. So you got to be patient as far as getting some of the really cold air to come on down. Just Zach, is there a new pattern shaping up where systems continue to drop out of Canada and bring colder and colder air? Is this temporary and it could get warm again? I would say at least through the next week or so, this trough is going to be in the east and the ridge in the west. There might be some realignment to some degree as we go beyond, say, the 10-day time frame. But one of the things that we had, when you have a wholesale ridge in one place and a wholesale trough in the other, that kind of leads to extremes happening in the atmosphere. Maybe we'll have something where there'll be a little bit of ridging in the east and a little bit of troughing in the west, and perhaps a gentler pattern in terms of the transition. It's hard to say. The models have been kind of unstable beyond the 7 to 10 day time frame in trying to gauge where the pattern is really going to go. Let's see. I do see a tropical question here, so that is from Walter Cathan. I live in South Florida. I'm wondering, the farther south the tropical system starts to develop, the more time it will have to intensify. That is correct, usually. The problem here is the fact that you're going to have, Walter, strong upper air winds that will eventually pick this thing up and start to move it northeastward at a fairly good clip. So that's going to do two things. It's going to move the surface system faster. It's also, with the stronger upper level winds, I think that you're not going to be able to see it develop very much. It might certainly develop into a depression and maybe even into a tropical storm. I don't know that it could get much beyond, say, a mid-level tropical storm, if only because of those factors. Plus, you're going to have this extra tropical low that's going to be developing on the front off the southeast coast of the United States, and that may wind up absorbing all of this over time. So those are the real considerations here. It's not like if this were August or September, I think you would have, you certainly would have a better argument. You could use Hurricane Nate as kind of an example of this, because Nate, started moving at a fairly fast clip when it got into the eastern Gulf of Mexico, and never was really able to get beyond a minimal hurricane. I know it did technically strengthen to almost a Cat 2, but by the time it made landfall, it was barely a Cat 1. But the fact that it would be moving at that kind of speed is going to keep it for strengthening. And I think also the fact that in this instance you're going to have those strong upper level winds that it eventually will get into. I think what may happen is it gets absorbed by the system that develops off the southeast coast, and it winds up enhancing the rainfall from the northern mid-Atlantic states and then through much of the northeast. I think that's where that we may see the outcome here. Back home in Fargo, we're supposed to get 40 to 60 mile an hour wind straight from the north and some snow. Yes, that does look indeed to be the case for you. So enjoy. By the way, just let me ask you, because are you guys seeing me in your shot? If you could let me know, I would appreciate it, because my video image seems to have gotten stuck here for some reason on the screen, but I'm showing it as you're seeing me. So just let me know if that's the case. James, CIP, good to see you here. Sean Bear, if this were January, yeah, you know what? If this were January, well, it might be. I think it would. If this were January, it would be a rain changing over to snow situation. Okay, got it. Thank you. I think it might be a rain changing to snow situation if this were January. And speaking of which, I think you may get a little stripe of snow when that upper trough swings by over the mountains of western North Carolina and some of the southeastern mountains of West Virginia and western Virginia. So but it'll be a very narrow area. And by the way, speaking of snow, if you noticed on the weather video and on the snow map, and this is why you can't really use those snow forecast maps for any real value beyond a couple of days, and that's because of the fact that it just changed so radically. I mean, it was ridiculous putting 10-inch snow amounts across parts of southern Ohio and Kentucky, when it's October. It's not going to happen. Okay. Delvin, you've got Boston tomorrow. You're still going to be on the edge of some of that rain. It may take a little longer for you to get that out of the way. Raymond, would we get bright banding on the DAX? I'm not sure what you're referring to, Raymond. You might get some rain out of that. You are going to get some rain out of this low for Sunday into Sunday night. I don't know if it's going to change over up there before it ends. It might not be cold enough. The core of this cold air, the shot that's coming down, is with the upper trough is to the west and south. So I'm thinking that you might not have it there, at least initially. No, Rob Bass, you're not getting snow in Florida in the Panhandle. Although this upper trough being as deep as it is in the east is going to mean for colder than normal temperatures for you over the next week or once this first trough that's happening now, and then after a brief warm up early next week and into the middle part of next week with that the deep trough in the east will mean for colder than normal temperatures for you there. Bright banding, the radar shows rain, but it's really snow. Yeah, I don't think that's going to be the case for you this time around. I know what you're talking about now. No, I do not believe that that's going to be the case. Delvin, you want a 40-inch Boston snowstorm. Okay, you're going to have to wait. Please, guys, it's not even Halloween yet, so give me a little room to work here, okay? High-res future radar is a little bit bullish on rain back to New York City tonight. Yeah, there is some rain not that far away, and it's certainly over parts of Long Island we've been seeing rain. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if some of it backs westward during the overnight hours. All right, folks, got to call it a night. Get ready for my 7 o'clock show. Thanks for being here. You can check out the website. I got a lot of posts about all of this today, so just check it out, meteorologistjoecioffi.com, and more on my Facebook page, Meteorologist Joe Cioffi. And for those of you who are new, Welcome to my YouTube channel. If you hit the subscribe button, I do these live streams at least once a day. When weather is active, I do it twice a day. So by all means, join the crowd and have some fun. Thanks for those of you who've hit Super Chat along the way, and my PayPal account throwing some coins so I could have coffee or ice cream. Tonight's ice cream night here at work, or a cigar. Any one or all three of them are fine. Thank you very much, folks. We'll see you tomorrow.